the vision of Mobian is to democratize measurement in order to drive outcomes. And so we believe that increasingly, with so much money being spent on digital platforms, and continually, I think we're going to stop calling it digital versus traditional. I think we're going to get to a place where these two worlds sort of just merge or blur, and maybe we're there already. But a heck of a lot of money is being spent across a wide array of formats and channels. And so back in the day, if you will, if I said you ran a 15-second ad, you'd have a pretty good idea of what I meant by that. You could sort of picture it. You'd imagine probably it was on a TV. Didn't really matter whether it was on CBS or NBC or ABC or whoever. It would kind of look and feel the same, and you could kind of understand the consumer experience of that ad similarly. If today I said you ran a 15-second ad, even if I said it was on 100% of the screen, even if I said it was to a human being, confirmed by protected media that it was delivered to a human, it was viewable, it was safe, all of those things, you would still have no idea if I was talking about TikTok or CTV in that example. And the challenge in digital is that all impressions are not created equal. It's not that one is necessarily better or worse, but they're just different. And because of that inconsistency of format, of consumer experience, of where, how, when we consume content and the ads that go with them, measurement is quite complex. And so it's led us down this very kind of challenging path where there are 200 companies trying to ask and answer questions in these worlds. That's why you have companies like EDO trying to understand, our search queries resulting from video ads being shown, and you have companies who are trying to understand TikTok exposures on the other hand. And those are two very different worlds. You have companies like you mentioned, Dumbstruck, trying to understand emotion of video, and you have companies like Attain, a company I'm on the board of, who are building consumer panels to understand purchase behavior across retailers. It all fits under this lens or this sort of umbrella of measurement. But the challenge is, how do all of those pieces work together? How can these sort of disparate worlds come together? And I think where they come together is that all of this is being funded by brands. Brands are 100% of the money in advertising, something that I think is often misunderstood, which is that we have a big ecosystem. We have ad tech providers and SSPs and DSPs and all of the money, 100% of all of the money in advertising comes from advertisers, period. That money then may filter through these different platforms who get pieces of it, and then they can spread it in other places. But the faucet, if you think about advertising money, the $600 billion, that faucet is 100% from advertisers. And so how do those advertisers make decisions about what they buy, where they buy, when they buy, how they buy, what creative to use, what audience to reach, what environment, what context, what mindset they're reaching people in, and how they optimize that over time, and what is the right KPI, and what should they be using to judge success, and how does that change if they're looking at one format or platform or strategy versus another? How does it change if it's a new brand that nobody's ever heard of, or if it's a brand that's been around for 75 years or 100 years? And so coming up with a strategy for a brand is hard in a fragmented measurement world. And so we want to try to simplify that. And what I would say is there's a lot of issues in digital measurement right now. A couple of them top of mind as an example in the open web, which is we sort of differentiate between, going to a traditional www whatever or an app for that site versus a so-called walled garden, the Facebooks, YouTubes, et cetera of the world. But in the open web, it is close to a $90 billion annual spend. So 90 billion of that 600 billion is going to open web. This is companies like Trade Desk, et cetera, on the DSP side. In the open web, we have a real challenge with things like what they call made for advertising. What is made for advertising? It's a website that has been specifically designed to essentially just show ads. So a lot of the content on the site is ads. You can sort of picture in your mind 7 ads on a page, 9 ads, 12 ads, all on the screen at the same time, all gaming a viewability metric so they can count as viewable ads, but not so that people are actually paying attention to any individual unit. And so what they call MFA has become a real and big issue in the open web as one simple example. In the walled gardens, where 80% of spend goes, That is platforms like YouTube and Meta, et cetera. There's a lot of issues there. One sort of the simple way to think about it would be transparency. There is a serious lack of transparency, and there has always been. That's why we call them walled gardens, between the data and information you get when you buy on one of these platforms. And so you do not get total visibility into every single place your ad ran, for example, when you buy in a walled garden. You get summaries. You get sort of a higher level view. You get, we can sort of aggregate it up by X, Y, and Z. You don't get it down to the individual place, context, show me the adjacencies to that ad, show me exactly where it ran, et cetera. And that causes issues. So there was a report that came out recently with YouTube where ads were running on being bought as TrueView, meaning that the little ad, the video ads with the skip button on them, and they were showing up on open web websites. So marketers coming in, buying an ad, thinking I'm buying YouTube. I thought I'm buying on YouTube.com, YouTube's app. Half of YouTube's ads show up on physical TV screens. So that's in your head as you're a marketer. And then the ads are showing up on the open web in auto-played, auto-muted, bottom of the screen sort of placements. And so that caused a lot of concern. And there was debates about, how much inventory was happening. Google admitted that it was happening. They confirmed it, but they said it was a small amount of inventory. But my point would be, okay, this is a transparency issue. It's not, the question was not how much of your inventory you were doing this with. The question was whether we knew you were doing it and whether we had transparency to that information as a marketer. And so transparency continues to be a challenge in the walled gardens. If you look at CTV, which is growing really fast, where money goes, fraud goes. And so in CTV, there are lots of examples of people selling, quote, CTV inventory that's not actually CTV inventory. And so, if you will, it's fake CTV inventory. And so there is money that is being thought of as being buying CTV ads, which are not, in fact, actually buying CTV inventory. And then there's more basic structural issues in CTV, like the TV screen can be off, but the ads can still be running because it's a separated device that's running the ads for TV. Retail media, maybe the last bucket, the fastest growing of digital advertising. Certainly, the estimates of how much money is being spent in retail media is gigantic. I think the most recent number I saw was over $100 billion this year, something like that. Amazon's 40 billion, so they're a pretty big chunk of it. But retail media has the promise of transaction-based purchase data. So the idea of so-called closed loop, I bought an ad, let me see what people bought of my product as a result of those ads. That's the power of retail media. The challenge, as retail media companies themselves have said, like Albertsons Collective, there is no standards. There are no standards. And so how are you measuring success in retail media? Albertson says there's no standards. What are the formats that are the ad units for retail media? Albertson says there are no standards. And by the way, Albertsons is one of the biggest sellers of retail media. So when the sellers are saying there's a challenge here, you really know there's a challenge. And so I think measurement kind of cuts through a lot of these different areas. And I think we're never going to solve all of these things fully, but I think what we try to do as an industry is we try to think about, all right, how do we make smarter and smarter decisions? How do we make more holistic decisions, end-to-end views, so that we can start to, over time, improve outcomes? The thing that I would say that I often think about is, do we know for sure that advertising even works? Good news for anyone listening, we do know that for sure. There's been a lot of data on that. And in fact, anytime that companies, particularly in like the CPG space, as an example, have cut back spend, you've seen them actually quickly reverse that trend and start spending again when they want to see revenue driving. And so they've been able to tie time and time again ad spend to revenue. And so advertising works. It's just a question of how do we get it to continue to work better? And that's sort of the forever mission that we're all on.